Hi, welcome to the Illinois Arborist Association How-To Series. I'm Norm Hall. I'm going to be your host for this series. This series we're going to be covering knots for the arborist. The objective is to show how to properly tie, dress, and set the commonly used arborist knots, hitches, and bends. We're going to break it down into two groups: climbing knots and rigging knots. We'll explain the application, advantages, and some of the limitations of each knot following the ANSI Z133 standards. Now, it's important to remember that all knots and hitches will reduce the rope's strength. So keep that in mind during this whole series. Okay, what I mean by knots reducing rope strength, it all comes down to the bend the rope makes. The smaller the radius bend, the more rope strength is lost or reduced. So a 1-to-1 ratio, so this is a 1/2 inch diameter rope. If a 1/2 inch diameter rope is making a 1/2 inch diameter bend, it can lose up to 50% of its rope strength. So the tighter the radius bend in the rope, the more reduction in rope strength there is. Well, let's go over parts of the rope in tying knots. The working end of the rope is called the working end. The other end, as I'm running this through my fingers, is called the running end, all the way down to the end. And then everything in between is called the standing part. So if we keep rope parts in mind during this series, it'll help in knot tying. So when I cross the ropes over one another, I make a loop. So the working end is on top and the running end is on the bottom. This is called an underhand loop. When I hold the ropes parallel to each other, this is called a bite. So when the rope ends are parallel and they do not cross, that's a bite. So keeping this in mind during this knot tying series will be very helpful. All right, we're going to start this off with climbing knots. We're going to break this down into two groups. We'll go over hitches and we're going to go over knots. Knots can be tied in the rope, where it doesn't need a host such as another rope or a tree limb or a tree trunk. And hitches need a host to tie around, such as another rope or the rope itself or a tree limb or a spar. Okay, we're going to go over knots first, and a very common arborist knot is the stationary bowline. Stationary bowline is usually used to tie links on with a captive eye. This is the captive eye. So I'm going to first start with showing you how to tie stationary bowline and what its limitations can be. So we're going to start off with about 2 feet of rope, and all we need to do is make a 2-inch diameter underhand loop. So remember, the working end is the top crossing rope and the running end is the bottom crossing rope. So this does not, what we do with a bowline is we make a loop. This does not determine the size of your loop. This running portion does, or working end of the rope does. So we're going to take our underhand loop. We're going to bring the working end in from the bottom of the loop. We're going to go all the way around the bottom crossing rope and then back through the loop. And you can tie this right, but you can pull it tight wrong. It's very important to grab both ends of the rope that entered and exited the loop and the running end of the rope to pull this tight, and that is your finished product. So it's very commonly used to tie on, like I said, captive eye snaps. During climbing operations, when we are ascending the tree, we are doing this, running this in this fashion. Watch the tail. The tail can work its way loose. Remember, the tail was way up in here. If we didn't have this tape on it, it can come all the way undone. So to prevent that from happening, we need to tie a stopper knot in the end. So here again, 2-inch diameter underhand loop. Bring the rope out of the bottom, go around the underhand loop, and I need enough rope to tie a stopper knot. Grab both ends of the rope that entered and exited the underhand loop and the running end to pull tight. And now I'm going to use the remaining tail portion to tie a stopper knot. And so during the tightening and loosening of this knot, the tail piece won't work its way through the bend in the rope. It's important to keep in mind, if you use this rope for that person to tie on a stationary or a captive eye link, to use that stopper knot in the end. Leave enough tail to tie a stopper knot. Okay, the next knot we're going to show is the figure 8 follow through. Here again, we're going to need a couple feet of tail. We're going to first start out by tying a figure 8, leaving ourselves a couple feet of tail. And then we're going to bring in our ring, and then we're going to just retrace the steps of this figure 8 knot. So bringing that around, and through, coming it around and through. We're going through the tie, dress, and set steps. So we've tied the knot correctly. Now we're aligning all the parts, dressing it, and it's important in this knot to remember that the part that's going to be loaded, this line, needs to be the top loop. So if you can see, as I cinch this tight, how this top loop gets tight, and when I pull on the tail, the bottom loop gets tight. So to correctly tie this, the loaded end needs to be the top loop. The last knot we're going to show is the Alpine Butterfly. The Alpine Butterfly is commonly used in an SRS climbing system, where you form a loop in the running end of the rope and the working end goes through that loop. I'm going to show you a real simple way to tie this. Just bring your wrist up or your palm up to the rope as if you're going to grab it, but leave your fingers spanned apart. Take the rope underneath and form one turn towards the fingertips. Make a second turn. Second turn, we're going to cross over both other turns. I'm going to grab the end closest to the fingertips, pull out some slack, and we're going to bring this bite through the first two loops we formed. So we've tied it, and now we're dressing it, aligning all the parts. And pulling on these two will set it, rendering it safe to use. I want you to notice how these two parts of rope are in line. So we can take our working end of the rope and put it through the loop we just tied, run this end up to our desired branch union, pull it tight, and this is now ready to work off of. Make sure that you work off the end that is cinched and not the end that will run. So you can do your entire work from this end of the rope. Then once you get down to the ground, you've disconnected, You can take the running end and pull the Alpine Butterfly all the way down. Pull your working end through that loop, and you can untie the knot. Now we're going to get into hitches. Hitches need to have a host to tie around. So before we had cinching hitches, or before we used cinching hitches, we would just connect or anchor our carabiner with a stationary bowline loop. So once we put our carabiner in there, the carabiner can tumble around, which is what we don't want. So to tie a link like this on, we need to tie a cinching hitch, and I'm going to show you how to tie the double fisherman's eye first. So we're going to put our link through, and we're going to pull out about 2 feet of tail. And we're going to form one loop and then cross over and bring that working end around again. And we're going to pick up our 2 parts of rope where the X is, where we formed that cross, and bring this end through there. So we've tied it. Now we're aligning the parts, so we have 2 parts parallel here, and we have 2 parts that cross here. And you'll notice that when I pull this on the running end, it cinches up to the link or the carabiner, and now the carabiner is actually cinched onto the rope. So once this gets loaded, one of the limitations is this can be extremely hard to untie. So when tying this, it's best to tie it to a carabiner that you can get this off of, because working in the tree will really cinch up your hitches. So we can rotate this around, get the link off, and we can pull on the running end, and it will pull that hitch right out. Next is the buntline hitch, which is another cinching hitch. It'll cinch onto the link. So we're going to bring the rope into the link, and here again we're going to need about 18 inches of tail. So what we're going to do is make one turn, cross over, make another turn, and then we're going to pick up both parts of that crossover again and bring this end through. So we've tied it. Now we're aligning the parts, addressing it. Notice how much time I'm spending dressing and aligning these parts. So now the link is cinched on to the rope. All this is a clove hitch tied with the working end coming out the bottom. In this case, on the bottom. The last cinching hitch we're going to show is the anchor hitch. The anchor hitch got its name from old pirates. This is how they used to secure their anchor to their anchor lines. So unlike the other 2 hitches, this is going to take 2 turns around the link. And this will indeed need a stopper knot at the end. So you have to keep that in mind when you're tying this. And also keep in mind that because we're taking 2 turns, we want the working end or the running end of the rope to be in line with the spine of the carabiner. So here's our first turn. Let's make our second turn. I'm going to bring this around and bring the end through the 2 coils we made. So we've tied it Now we're aligning the parts and dressing it. So I left enough tail to tie a figure-8 stopper knot. Because we have 2 turns on the link, and this can rotate and push down the barrel of the gate, which can in turn turn the gate. So if you choose to use this hitch, rotate it so it's on the downside of the barrel. So to disengage the gate, we have to actually push up and then turn. So if this does get stuck on the barrel, it's actually going to lock it in place. And this will not cinch up like the other two. So you can untie this figure-8 stopper knot first and untie the anchor hitch and pull your rope right out of the link. Now we're going to get into climbing hitches, and we're going to break this down into 2 categories. First category would be I&I hitch cords, I&I, and second category is going to be split tails, where we have a spliced eye or a tied eye on one end only. We're going to start with using I&I hitch cords, and the first hitch we're going to do is the VT or Velveton Tress. So to start with this, never tie the hitch cord on to the working end of the rope. Always tie it on to the running end of the rope. So we're going to kind of uneven balance the hitch cord, so we have a shorter tail here and a longer tail here, because with the working end of this hitch cord, we're going to start with 4 coils. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 coils. And then we're going to bring the top rope over the top of the bottom rope to form a braid. And then we're going to reverse. So this one was on top first. Now I want this one to be on the bottom next. And we're going to reverse it one more time. So this is on the bottom now. So I want this one to be on the top. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 coils. 1, 2, 3 braids. Take our micro pulley, put it on the rope, and then we're going to put an eye on either side of that micro pulley. I'm going to take my carabiner and capture one of the eyes, go through the micro pulley, and then capture the other eye. I'm going to rotate this so the gate opens down. And I'm going to clip this into my harness, and then I can take my working end, clip that into either the middle hole or the bottom hole. And we've tied it. Now we're aligning all the parts and make sure it's going to hold you before you ascend. So now it's set. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 coils, 1, 2, 3 braids. The next climbing hitch I'm going to show is the English pressic. Here again, we're going to use an I&I hitch cord. So with this, we can go ahead and capture both eyes onto the carabiner first. And on the running end of the rope, we're going to form a bite and then bring the carabiner in through that bite and kind of pull it loosely tight, because we're going to go inside that bite once, twice, So we wind up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 coils in this knot or hitch. We've tied it, now we have to dress it and line all the parts. I'm going to rotate the carabiner. The nice thing about the English prusik is it will work in either direction. It can work this way or it can work this way. So it's what's known as a bi-directional hitch. It's the only one out there that's bi-directional. Take it apart, we just unclip and reverse the process. That's it. Next hitch we're going to show is the Swedish prusik. Here again we're going to be using a I&I hitch cord. We're going to start off pretty much the same way we did with the VT. Have a little shorter tail, and then we're going to start tying the hitch with a longer tail. So we're going to start with tying 3 coils on top. And then bring this one down and go in the opposite direction, so both ends of the eye exit the same way, going the same way. So we've tied it, now we have to dress it, align all the parts. Both of these need to be equal length. So we have 1, 2, 3 coils on top, 1 coil on the bottom. Both legs of the hitch exit in the same direction. You can clip in. Before I weight it, I want to set it. So now it's set, it will hold my body weight. And untying is just the reverse process. In this segment, we're going to go over split tails and what hitches to use with a split tail. We're going to start with a taut line hitch, which is a hitch I climbed on for many, many years. So this hitch cord has a splice tie on one end, and it's 5 foot in length. And I'm tying this on an 11.8 millimeter rope, and this is a 1/2 inch diameter cord. So in the real world, I should be tying this on to a same diameter rope. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to start off with, we'll call this the bridge. I'm going to cross over my running end on the bottom. I'm going to make 2 coils. I'm going to bring this up over the bridge. I'm going to make another 2 coils. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 coils. I have one end exiting opposite the other, and this will determine my bridge length. The taut line hitch is known as a walking or rolling hitch, so it's extremely important after you get the proper bridge length to tie a stopper knot to keep this from rolling out. There's several accidents that have happened where a climber neglected to tie a stopper knot in this hitch, and the end made its way through and the climber fell and can be severely injured. So I've set it, I've dressed it, aligned all the parts. Now I'm going to weight it and Even though this is an 11.8 millimeter rope with a 1/2 inch split tail, it's still holding. So it's extremely important to remember to tie a stopper knot when using the taut line hitch. The last climbing hitch we're going to show with the split tail is the Blake's hitch. So here again, we're using a split tail 5 feet long. This will determine our bridge length, and we're going to put my thumb up against the running end of the climbing line and capture the first 2 coils with my thumb. So here's 1 coil, here's a 2nd coil, and then we're going to make 2 more coils, so we wind up with a total of 4 coils. Now this is where it gets tricky. You have to go underneath the bridge. Don't go underneath this way. Go underneath opposite. So you're forming a bight in the rope, and then I'm going to pull my thumb out and keep that space open in the first 2 coils. I'm going to pull this end through those first 2 coils, making sure that I went underneath my bridge. So I've tied it. Now I'm going to dress it by aligning all the parts. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 coils all above the bridge. After we tie the last coil, the tail comes underneath the bridge and gets captured in the first 2 coils. This is also known as a rolling hitch. So it's extremely important with this hitch as well to tie a stopper knot. So I've tied it, I've dressed it, I have my stopper knot. I'm going to weight it, make sure it's going to hold my body weight. I'm good to go. Now we're going to go over rigging hitches. So this is what we have: cow hitch, timber hitch. Those are the only 3 I'm going to show, but those are the 3 most common rigging hitches. First hitch we're going to show is the cow hitch. Notice first we have a spliced eye sling, and I have the porter wrap girth hitched onto the spliced eye sling. So normally we would anchor this way down near the base of the tree, but for this purpose we're going to anchor it up near chest height. So I'm going to take the porter wrap and I'm going to throw it around the tree. And I'm going to form a bight. I want this length to be as short as possible. This is called the throat. I want the throat length to be as short as possible. So I'm going to pull the bight as tight as I can right next to that girth hitch. Then I'm going to go around the tree in the opposite direction with the sling, keeping the 2 rope parts parallel. I'm going to take the end of the sling, I'm holding this end tight, and bring it through the bight, and then pull that tight, and notice that I'm pulling against this bight. I'm not pulling with the bight, I'm pulling against the bight. And to finish this off, we need to tie a 1/2 hitch around the throat, and the 1/2 hitch has to be where the tail exits against the bight. So I'll show you the first way first. I'll show you the correct way first. So I'm capturing the porter wrap with a, what we call a better half. Notice the tail exits against the bight, and if we have excess rope, we can just pick up only one end and get that tail length out of our way. Now this is good to go. The nice thing about this is you can pull in either direction and it will stay right where it's at as long as this is tight. Limitation of this knot is you need the rope long enough to go around your host twice. So I showed you the better half. I'm going to show you the incorrect half hitch. So now I'm pulling with the bite and I'm forming my half hitch in this direction, capturing, or I'm getting rid of my extra tail length. That's the incorrect way to do this. So once again, form the bite. We have two parts going through the bite, pulling against the bite. I'm forming a half hitch right at the throat. So there's a minimal length here. And if we need to get rid of our excess tail length, we just capture the tail in one of the turns. You're good to go. Hey, now we're going to get into anchoring an arborist block using the same thing. I think it's important to know that we use the same hitch, but this time we're going to anchor an arborist block. So we're going to start off the same way. Just throw the block around the tree. Here again, I still want to minimize my throat length. So I formed a bite, go around the tree a second time, keeping my rope ends parallel, bringing the end through the bite, pulling against the bite, and tying my better half hitch with the tail exiting against the bite. And here again, if we have excess tail, we can just capture that with one of the turns. As long as this is tight and our throat length is very minimal, this is going to stay captured wherever we put it. The last rigging hitch we're going to show is the timber hitch. Remember, the limitation of the cow hitch was you needed to have enough rope to go around the host twice. If you don't have enough rope to go around the host twice, you can always opt to use a timber hitch. We're going to start off the same way. Bring the pulley around your host. We're going to form that bite. And notice that I do not have enough tail length to go around the host or the tree again. So in this case, I'm just going to start off making a series of spirals, keeping my throat length minimal. So I need a minimum of 5 spirals. I don't want to do this. Let's make coils. I don't want to make coils where they're right next to each other. That's a no-no. We want to spread these spirals out, because this hitch works on friction where the underside of this rope contacts the tree. So we have 1, 2, here's number 3. Here's number 4. And here's number 5. Another limitation to this hitch is the lowering line has to come against and pull against the bite. So if our lowering line is here and we set this in our arborist block, notice that it's pulling against the bite, so it's going to stay right where we put it. If we put the lowering line with the bite, it can have a tendency to turn around the host. So we always want to set this where we're pulling against the bite. Minimum of 5 spirals, pull against the bite, and we're good to go.